here. Help yourself. And there's some cake over there in celebration of our departing board members. who gain a new life on Monday nights. So with that, I want to call the meeting to order, and let's record attendance. Anne Marie?
One last time here.
Kyle Gangler? Here. Emily Gaiman? Here. Nicole King? Here. William Lysa?
Here.
Stephen Hawk?
Present.
Mary Jo Runner?
Here.
Rhea Serene? Here. Christopher White?
Here.
I'd like to thank all of the board members over the past 2 years for your spectacular attendance. I think there's almost been no missed meetings by anyone. So thank you. With that,
Not too late, buddy. Commentary from over there. I missed a couple. Mostly good reasons. A couple of sporting events. Professional.
okay, with that, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any visitor comments?
Lisa Maloney?
There you go. That might be better. How's that? Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. My name is Lisa Maloney. I am the parent of an 11th grader and a 2nd grader in the district, and I'm also the president of Southern Lehigh Music Parents, a nonprofit organization that supports our students in their music journey through the district, better known as SLMP to most people. So I'm here tonight for a couple of reasons. First, I want to voice concern for the state of our high school auditorium, and along with many other community members, ask that district funds be allocated to this space. The condition of the auditorium has been a topic for many years, and other projects have taken precedence in the meantime, some of them rightfully so. But it is time now to at least enact a short-term solution to ensure that our students have the opportunities to display their talents in a way that they deserve. How would it look if other districts and other students of superior musical talent come into our facility for county band later this school year and we have a speaker that doesn't work? How does it look when our award-winning theater program goes on stage in March and they have microphones that can't be used on stage and they've had to rent equipment that is taken away from the theater budget? That's something that shouldn't happen in a district as privileged as ours. We've had community members come to SLMP to ask us what we can do to help the theater program. We are more than happy to continue to enrich our students in this district by providing them with additional opportunities that don't normally come from the school budget. Some of the things we pay for, in case you're not aware, are music adjudications. We pay for social events for the students as team building. We pay for special music. We pay for jazz clinics and so many other things that we raise funds for throughout our community. When we're being asked to make up shortfalls in a theater budget, when we're being asked to help to cover deficiencies in our facilities, as the president of that organization, it concerns me to be asked to present money to the community in that way. I would like to see the school board and the district help to remedy some of these shortfalls in our facilities rather than community being asked to do additional fundraising and max out already overtaxed supporters and donors. So speaking of funding, that brings me to one other topic that I wanted to bring up this evening, and that is an agenda item regarding the superintendent's employment contract. While I don't purport to know the situation and the public does not know why this amendment is on the table, and with all due respect to Dr. Mann, I think it would be necessary for the public to understand the financial ramifications of looking for a new superintendent, paying for that superintendent's benefits, and then additional years of Dr. Mann's retirement health insurance until he's eligible for Medicare 2 years ahead of schedule. I think we need to understand the financial ramifications for that, understand where that money will come from in the budget, and that should be brought in front of taxpayers, and that should be something that we're allowed to comment on in this type of forum. Just want to understand and the transparency that you all promised us. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to what will be a great final meeting from some of you.
Dodd Lamberton.
Good evening. My name is Dodd Lamberton. I live on Founders Drive in Center Valley. I have 3 grandchildren who are Southern Lehigh students. I'm here to comment on the item in your Human Resources report related to the proposed change in the superintendent's existing contract, which recommends that upon his retirement, the district would provide him medical insurance benefits until he's eligible for Medicare, as long as he's completed 3 years of employment on June 30th of next year. His current 5-year contract stipulates that he must have completed all 5 years of agreed-upon employment before this benefit can go into effect. I speak against this proposed change for both management and financial reasons. This is not personal. I've never met Dr. Mann and have no knowledge of his effectiveness. But let's hope he's a terrific superintendent in this excellent school district, and we should want him to remain in this position as long as possible. If you vote to trim from 5 to 3 the minimum years of employment required to vest this valuable reward, you would be incentivizing him to leave the district next June 30th, 2 years ahead of his 5-year contract, 2 years short, of his 5-year contract. How would this benefit the district? This makes no sense to me. Then there's the financial consideration, as was just mentioned. With the current cost of quality health insurance, this would be a significant added expense to the district, that is, to us taxpayers, of thousands of dollars. I cannot believe that a school board committed to prudent management and careful financial stewardship would approve this, and I sincerely hope that you do not. Thank you.
Kathleen Carson.
Hello. I'm just taking a moment to thank the board members tonight, the departing board members, for your service. I've learned a lot from each of you. Bill and Jeff, you were on the board when I joined in 2013, and you had already been on the board for a few years. Bill, I want to thank you for your persistence in advocating for the new stadium and the turf field. I was happy to be on the board that started it, but you all got it done, and I really want to thank you for doing that. I understand it's fabulous. Jeff, you've always been your true, authentic self on the board, and your unpredictability was refreshing. I liked how you'd change your mind with new info, but I often was not sure how you were going to vote. Never knew. I believe that. I also want to thank you for your advocating for the library. The last meeting that we had, it was like, I am 100% behind Jeff Dimig on the library. And then we got to full day K, and I'm like, I am 100% against Jeff Dimig on full day K. So that's one of the things that the board learns, is that every issue, you can come at it a different way, and you can have different alliances and different ways of thinking. Priya and Kyle, you came on the board 3 months before COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown. Priya, when you started, you were immediately asked to join the pandemic committee as one of the health service professionals, and you and Anita did a fantastic job. And I just want to commend you for your grace under pressure, because boy, was that hard. And Kyle, you've always been the person that asks the questions that many of us are thinking, especially in the audience. It's like, yes, Kyle. So I want to thank you for that. I think every board needs somebody that just speaks up from your heart and says what you're thinking, what we're all wondering, and asks those hard questions. And I know that every 2 years the board changes. It's like a puzzle, and you've got to make everything work. And I appreciate this board. It took maybe 2 years to come together, but thank you.
Any comments or questions on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved. Dr. Mann.
Thank you, Mrs. Reinhardt. I want to echo some of the very kind words that were said about our departing board members, Priya, Bill, Kyle, and Jeff. It is true that one of the most difficult forms of of community service is the school board, because as I will often say, if you're volunteering, peeling potatoes, or cleaning up litter, you're doing a great thing, but no one complains to you about those things, right? But as a member of the school board, you make challenging decisions about allocation of resources and students' education. And in the last 3 or 4 years, you have been at the center of a national controversy regarding COVID. And each of you, in your own unique ways, has handled these issues gracefully and thoughtfully and kindly. And I will say, in my own experience, you are the remainder of the board that hired me, with exception to Emily, who was staying on. And I am continually grateful for that confidence that you placed in me. And it has been a great thing for me to have served here. And I will always remember that kindness and thoughtfulness that you demonstrated to me. So congratulations on whatever it is that's next. Thank you on behalf of the community for the amazing work that you have accomplished in among the most difficult circumstances. And I do sincerely hope to stay connected with each of you as we move forward as community members or volunteers or simply just people who stop in once in a while to say hello. So with that, I do thank you for all of your service and all that it is that you do. So thank you. Thank you very much. A few other things unrelated to the departure of board members. And I will also say, congratulations to Emily for your election. I think our next meeting will focus on the new people who are coming in. We are necessarily focusing on those who are leaving tonight. But congratulations on your willingness to continue that challenging service in support of our students and our community. So congratulations with that.
Could I just say a few words? Usually some people like to say a few words on their last meeting. I don't know if I can say it. I don't want to interrupt you though.
No, I just have other things.
It's really short.
I think it's a perfect,
I time myself at a minute and a half.
Absent objections to our president, I think it would be really great. James, do not put on the timer. Do not put on the timer.
I might say it slower though, because I have a habit of talking fast. If that's okay. It's nothing mean. And hopefully I can read it because I can't look at it. Okay. So good evening, Southern Lehigh community. It's been a difficult 4 years for us all. Certainly when I took office in 2019, we had no idea what 2020 would bring. So many times items were politicized when they didn't have to be. I have found this to be so frustrating when my purpose in serving really had been and has been to improve our schools and our community. That was always my interest, no political agenda, just thinking about our kids. That included wanting kids in school throughout the pandemic while maintaining the safety for all in our buildings. Don't forget the shutdown was a state order after which we were left to filter through expert recommendations. I learned a lot about the red tape that exists when it comes to the DOE, as it restricted our ability to be inventive, because I did try. Despite what had circulated about planned professional development and DEI, there really wasn't any conspiracy amongst the board members to have CRT in our schools. Similarly, teachers, administrators, and counselors aren't secretly trying to keep information regarding kids from their parents. Why would they? Many of them are parents too, and they care about your kids. Please remember that a lot of what happens within our school district depends on a strong administration team, not the board of directors. I would ask that the remaining and incoming members to continue working together in the interests of the district. And remember, asking questions, which I often do at a board meeting, doesn't indicate a lack of faith in our team, but rather is required of us to do our due diligence. I would also like to thank my family and friends for their support over the years, especially my husband for pulling extra parenting duties, which is what he's doing now, so that I could serve. I would also like to thank the many community members, including students and teachers, for your kind words over the years after some really tough meetings. They meant a lot to me. I believe that I am leaving the board in good hands, and for that, I am thankful. Remember, in order to make us successful, we need a cohesive team, which includes students, parents, teachers, and administrators. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Serene. Thank you very much. And a few other items. First, you'll see on the agenda under Mr. Pepe's section, the Act One budget approval tonight, and that simply means that we will not be increasing taxes outside of the Act One index. And our hope, I know Mr. Pepe is working very hard as all of our administrators to have no tax increase at all at the end of the year, but that's the purpose of that on the agenda tonight. Two other things that I want to point out. First, we had 2 literacy nights at Hopewell Elementary and Liberty Bell Elementary. Over 300 people at each event came to celebrate learning to read. It was absolutely fantastic. And what was equally fantastic is that nearly every one of our teachers volunteered to to come and participate and engage with our parents and engage with our students. And it really was just 2 phenomenal evenings. Thanks to Mr. Mansfield and Dr. Chromiak for your work into that, to all of our staff and our community who was just very, very excited about this activity. It was really great. And also really great was the district celebration of Veterans Day. I had the opportunity to go around to the schools on Veterans Day. Start out the morning at Hopewell, where we had people gathered around the flagpole, playing taps, parades for veterans around the schools, videos welcoming, met a lot of people. We had parades at our intermediate school where all of our kids would line along the sidewalks, and an amazing number of veterans would be in their cars, almost like a ticker tape parade as they were pulling through, just being cheered. And you could just see the smiles on the kids' faces was only exceeded by the smiles on the faces of the vets and their families as they were driving through. And it was just an overwhelming thing to observe the way that Southern Lehigh honors its veterans on Veterans Day. So I did want to thank everyone who was involved with that, because I knew while things were going on and positive things were happening, it really was something to see the extent to which this was a priority here in the district, and one that we should all be very, very proud of. And then finally, I want to introduce Dr. Trinkle, because we have, as we do each year in November, a public report of student achievement. And this is, I think, probably the most critical hour we'll spend during the course of a year, where we look at how we think kids are doing, multiple measures of their success. And while tonight is a single report, please know that the information we talk about tonight is a daily conversation that we're having among our teachers and administrators and parents throughout the district. And so with that, maybe 2 caveats. The first being that everything we do, and the good things or the challenging things that are experiencing by kids, often cannot be reduced to a number. And while numbers are important, they are not the be all end all. They are part of the metrics the broad range of metrics that we use to evaluate our kids. And the second is that while we have very strong results, we also are privileged to serve a very strong community when it comes to their support of education. And so when we look at very, very high scores, we are first to say that we ought to have very high scores, and high scores ought to be expected from us. So with that, I want to thank Dr. Trinkle and Dr. Solometto for organizing, and all of our administrators who had very active roles in presenting and developing this report. So with that, thank you, Dr. Trinkle, and stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mann. As Mr. Pepe likes to say, this is the main event. This is why we're all here, is to review this information. And this evening, like similar to last year, we will identify broad areas in our assessment scores. We will review our trends, and we'll even draw some conclusions for you. But I think most importantly, you'll see our actionable steps that we have come up with to address whatever you're seeing in our data. So where to begin? When we look at our student outcomes and standardized assessments, I want you to consider a few things while we do that. We have so many students, they're so talented, they're entrepreneurs, they're musicians, they're artists, they're athletes, many of which receive outstanding test scores, outstanding results. And some where we reinforce self-confidence. And many of our students, all of our students are headed for great success, and we support them no matter what the score and no matter the outcome. We continue to champion some of the fundamentals of the early literacy practices, and you're seeing that by what Dr. Mann just mentioned in our literacy nights. We have screeners to identify our more struggling students and learners, early intervention. We have monitoring and supports for all students to make sure that they're either on grade level or surpassing grade level work. You have, as a board, supported our coordinated systemic efforts to reading in the belief that all students are capable of these things. This has required our full focus and our full commitment. And that has come from our teachers, from our instructional assistants, from all staff, and they have been absolutely amazing. Along with the great work of our teachers, like I said, our IAs, our school counselors, our administrators, all staff have been able to see some positive impacts from those changes in our academics and the impact from the new curricular initiatives that we were pursuing. So thank you for that. As we continue to work and evaluate our core programs, we continue to look in ways to exceed our curricular goals. And that takes all of us in this critical work. Our K-6 curriculum is well underway in implementation, and we have our sights on other curricular areas. Yet in education, success is never final and reform is never complete. We still have some work to do. I will begin tonight by a very brief overview from the Future Ready Index, which is the forward-facing academic outcomes that most people see. It tells us how we are comparing academically across the Commonwealth. Your in-depth data overview will come from our building administrators. And Southern Lehigh has a great amount of raw material. We have achievement, we have family support, we have great background knowledge. We are at the upper end of most of the achievements, and you will see that tonight in our data. We are still constantly looking for new ways and new strategies to engage our students. And we are relentlessly trying to self-improve our work so that we can provide the most exceptional opportunity for our students. So just to set the stage, as a couple of reminders very briefly, we have several key indicators, both state and local assessments that measure our outcomes. The most familiar to many are the PSSAs and the Keystones. PSSA exams are offered grades 3 through 8 in ELA and math, and in grades 4 through 8 in science. And those are measuring our achievements based on grade level standards. The Keystone exams, as you can see up there, are offered in grades 7 and 8 for Algebra 1, and then at the high school level for Algebra 1, Biology, and English. We also use STAR, we use Acadience, we use IXL Math. I'm sure most of you are familiar with those assessments if you have children in especially K-6. But those are the mechanisms where we're capturing student growth more regularly. Those forms of assessments are done much more frequently than the state standardized assessments done once a year. With that is a snapshot of a test at one particular time of year, at a very specific time in the spring. Again, achievement is evident. We own our areas of focus, and we will strategically focus on those areas, and you'll see that upcoming. Important distinction here, you'll see on the left, you have our data warehouse. So you have your Future Ready Index, you have your PVOS, and you have your eMetric data. That's where all the data is stored from PSSAs and Keystones. So they are not mutually exclusive. The Future Ready Index comes with some coloring as a legend to tell you what they mean. Remember, eMetrics and PVOS are more direct comparisons, but both really help us kind of look curricularly what our needs are and what student supports are needed. Every year, though, the state is kind enough to provide us with targets to hit, which is where those colors come from. So blue means that our student group has exceeded the standards. Green means they have met the standard target goal for growth. And red means that we didn't meet it. You will see some red tonight, and I will explain why. Keep in mind, too, that due to the exemptions for 1920 school year for state standardized assessments, you may see an insufficient sample size, and that you will see for ELA for us this year. Last year, you saw it for biology. This year, it's in ELA. And those are those federal state accountability measures. You bank their state assessment scores until grade 11. That's why you see insufficient sample. You should see that pretty much working its way through this year. You should hopefully not see that moving forward, according to some webinars that we've attended. It's from the state. So while this is helpful data, it is one single data point, I remind you, and that should be considered when looking at it that way. All these are data points that looks at groups of students, not a single comparison of test scores. It helps us when we're looking back at kind of what we were doing and what we want to look for as we're moving ahead. It's helpful to look at them as projections, not predictions. So it's a projection of student achievement. It does not predict how well students will actually do. There are some limits. You can't really do some cross comparison unless you're looking at other school entities, which may or may not be similar to our demographic. Tested at different times under different testing conditions, it all makes a difference. But we use this as a general and a diagnostic tool when looking at our students' growth. We're consistently looking for potential long-term gains and ways that we don't fall back on our academic gains. We don't want students to lose ground academically. All pieces to the story, and I mention that because as we reshape our literacy program, as we focus on MTSS, and as we focus on our tiered levels of support, all of that impacts these outcomes that you'll see tonight. So we'll start just at a broad overview. This is our K-3 Future Ready Index. So you'll see Hopewell first, obviously 76.6% in ELA, and that's proficient and advanced together. 18% will make up the advanced score. In the green, we're meeting our growth target. We're happy to see this movement from last year into this year, although it's not the same testing group, not the same cohort. Likewise, in mathematics, you'll see we are exceeding the growth standard at 76.6% proficient and advanced, but we have almost 32% of that number scoring advanced in mathematics from K-3 at Hopewell. You'll see very similar scores at Liberty Bell, student achievement falling into the 75.4% in ELA. Almost 22% of those students are scoring advanced. And in mathematics, you're almost at an 80% generating that proficient advanced combined score with almost 38% of our third graders scoring advanced in mathematics. I want to highlight our attendance rate as well. It's such a pivotal, attendance is such a pivotal thing in creating the school culture of a school building. It enhances a sense of community, it's shared learning experiences, and it demonstrates a positive atmosphere. Our kids are coming to school with a 95% attendance rate at Hopewell and almost 98% at Liberty Bell. Moving to JPILS, we are hitting almost about a 95% attendance rate there. Kids are showing up to school. That is a great thing. That allows us to offer career and college-ready exploration activities when all of our students are attending school as well. We're also hitting that at a very high level. ELA is at a 79.3%, 33% of that is advanced. Mathematics, 69.4, which is almost 37 of our students are scoring advanced in mathematics. Science is at 94.3, and almost 72% of our students in that category are advanced. That is strong data. We are still looking at ways to investigate and increase our improvement, specifically in math. For our middle school, you'll again see that there's a sense of belongingness, and as we know, when students feel engaged, they show up to school, and theirs is about an 85% attendance rate. Also, strong evidence for career development and exploration at the middle school. 73% of our students are advanced and proficient in ELA. 32% are making up the advanced category. 50.9% in math. We are about 3% away from hitting the target. So if that score is 3% higher, we'd be in the green. Maybe one or two test takers, given the large cohort of students that were tested. 20% of our students are advanced in math at the middle school level. Mrs. Webb will go through that in a little bit more detail for you. 85% of our students are proficient in science, 51% being advanced. Again, global data using to support our work for student achievement. Our high school, I want to intentionally reinforce too that our attendance rate is very, very high here, which in regular partnership with our families at home, we are very appreciative of that. We continue to offer career and college-ready opportunities at a very high level at our high school as well. You'll see ELA has the insufficient sample size, so we don't really have a comparison from last year, and that was due to the accountability waivers from 1920. Mathematics, we are at a 61.3% proficient advance, hitting our growth target. And in biology, while we are above the state average, we did not quite hit our growth target at 69.4. I will tell you that it was 72% is what we needed to hit for that. So again, one or two test takers. Now, very broad brush of a Future Ready Index. And from a global perspective, this is data that helps us. We don't get this very quickly. I think it was just finalized last Friday. which is when it was released to the public. We had a little bit of an early bird look at it, but it really doesn't give us much time to do the strong work like our regular assessments throughout the year do. Dr. Solomano will be providing a little bit more detail on some of these items, and our administration will go through those meaningful measures about what we're doing to remediate and enrich.
So, so as Dr. Trinkle said a moment ago, it was lower than I expected. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Dr. Trinkle went over the Future Ready Index, which is, as she said, a very broad brush. But what I am going to do is give you just a little bit of a preface around the data that our principals are going to really be diving into, which is a little bit more granular and a little bit more specific building by building. And so tonight, what you're going to hear from them are two types of data. You're going to be hearing about achievement data, and you're going to be hearing about growth data. And I wanted to make sure that we spent a minute or two just clarifying those two terms, what their similarities are and what their very important differences are. So we'll start with achievement data. Achievement data is collected as a result of summative assessment, which usually occurs near the end of a school year. That's measuring whether or not students are meeting end of year expectations without taking into account their starting point. So in other words, achievement data is measuring, did our students learn what we set out for them to learn when we started to teach them at the beginning of the year? By looking at their achievement data, their end of year performance, we can group them into buckets. We can say whether or not students achieved at low, average, or high levels. And I say that because that's what PSSA and Keystone do when they label student achievement as basic or below basic, proficient, or advanced. We can look at this data to help us make instructional and programmatic decisions that will benefit our students in the future. Similarly, we can look at groups of students in the same way to see if groups of students are achieving at basic, below basic, proficient, or advanced levels. However, this achievement data does not provide us the entire picture as we are trying to make informed decisions about our schools and our district. Achievement data alone does not tell us about student growth or progress that may have occurred during that school year, because again, achievement data does not take into account the student's starting point. Maybe doing something wrong. Was I there? Okay, very good. Okay. So then when we're looking at growth data, we're talking about PVAS, which stands for Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System. And Dr. Trinkle did allude to this when she was talking about Future Ready because there are some similarities there. PVAS does take into account the starting point. PVAS measures student growth. And so when we're talking about growth, we're talking about where students started from one assessment, let's say PSSA in 1 year, to where they ended up when they took that same assessment, let's say the PSSA, the following year. PVAS is not a test. It's another way of looking at the data. It is a comprehensive analysis of achievement trends and progress rates. What PVAS gives us, more so than something like achievement data, is what effect schooling has had on that child, what effect our curriculum and our instruction has had. And so as a district, when we take a look at PVAS data, what we're able to do is look through a long lens at student achievement data across groups from sort of more of a bird's eye view and say, what are we doing for our students that's really working and what might we need to do to help them make more growth in the future? When we look at things like curriculum, course offerings, master scheduling, instructional practices, and professional development, we look at that growth data to identify those areas. So as you listen to principals in just a moment review their building level data, please keep in mind the difference between achievement and growth. Both types of data are important to consider when we look at the full picture of student performance in our district, but they are interrelated and different. For example, we have a generally high performing population of students. So as you might hear principals talk about how their students have achieved at high levels and they've scored large percentages of them have scored advanced or proficient. You may also see that their growth data is in the red. What that means, as Dr. Trinkle said, we have great raw material. We have high achieving students. And so it is our particular challenge in a high achieving district like this one to figure out how we're going to grow those students. How are we going to add value, which is why it's called PDAS. How are we going to add value to those students? And so now I'm going to pass it along to our K-3 principals who are going to share with us the data from their buildings.
All right, good evening. So Brian and I, Mr. Mansfield and I have achievement data to share. Not unfortunately, we are the first group that takes the PSSA. Therefore, we do not have a growth measure that is outward facing. However, internally, we have many other academic measures that we use to measure growth for our students. Today, we are going to talk about our PSSA performance levels. So Hopewell's coincidentally has the same exact scores, proficient or advanced, for both ELA and math. So I'm not sure how that happened, but kind of a little fun thing we have going on there. Not even the same breakdown. But yeah, so Dr. Trinkle shared the Future Ready, which is the outward facing. We pull our data from eMetric, which houses all of our data information. So I'm going to go with that score because it's the higher one, which is 78.3%. It does pull individual student scores. It breaks down all of the standards and how they performed. I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy. It could be just opt-outs. It could be we had some students who were taking the PASA versus the PSSA. But we're going to go with 78.3 for this slide tonight. We are going to look at the breakdown of that. So really proud to say that this year is last year was the first year ever. We had 0 students who were below basic in ELA. So that is something that we really celebrated and we were really proud of. We had, as you can see, more students we're getting back to more students in proficient and advanced. And again, we're closing that gap of students who were below basic who have now kind of moved into, talking about growth into that basic realm for ELA and reading. In math, we did still have a couple of students who were below basic, but just looking at the colors, you can see that we are decreasing our students who were in that below basic range and moving them into basic, proficient, and advanced levels.
So you can see Liberty Bell's numbers in ELA, we're at 75.4% proficient or advanced, and in math at 78.9 proficient or advanced there. And as we progress for our 4-year trend in ELA, we know we were really, really pleased with what this particular cohort of students did on the PSSA, knowing the data we saw in our MTSS and data meetings and in our tiered interventions. This is far superior to what our expectations were. So we actually were very, very happy to see such a low amount of below basic and still maintaining a high in our green and blue areas. And then when we look over at math for our 4-year trend, we again are looking at really shrinking that below basic category and shrinking that basic category, and then really continuing to push those kids at the higher level in their achievement in math. So we're very happy about that and the things that we're seeing in those growth areas.
Some of our actionable steps include last year, we really took a really hard look at our MTSS process and what kids needed intervention, what types of interventions we were giving. Very happy to continue to look at data on a regular basis. We use STAR, we use Acadience. We're targeting specific standards, and we're using, again, those data points to look at K through 3. Since we only have an outward-facing 3rd grade, we are using a lot of data to look at our kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade. We are implementing a new core and continuing the great work of the foundational skills using foundations and geodes. By having foundations and geodes in place, we have luckily had less kids needing interventions this year in those areas. The reason we implemented foundations and geodes last year is because we saw such a high need for foundational skills that we just kept kind of band-aiding and putting kids into intervention versus looking at a tier 1 good core resource. So now that we have that in place, we are needing to pull less kids out of general ed curriculum into interventions because we have a strong foundational piece in place. And now with the added layer of wit and wisdom, we are hoping that some of those standards that we saw that had lower scores, such as nonfiction and things, that because now our core has these things in place, that those scores will continue to go up. We'll continually review that program. We're doing guided observations, walkthroughs, collecting teacher feedback at a district level. And again, we have ongoing implementation for wit and wisdom, but also planning time for our teachers because it is a heavy lift. It is a productive struggle, but our teachers and kids are really meeting that challenge and doing great work.
And continuing with that, we're not forgetting about math. We are looking at lots of resources that support math fluency. Our team has put together binders for every teacher and just a lot of different activities similar to what we did with reading, building from that very foundational skills and building up. Teachers have already really looked at wit and wisdom and said, how can we bring that mindset of teaching into the math classroom, that explorative, thought-provoking, notice and wonder type of instruction and thinking into math. So teachers are working on that as teams. As Dr. Mahan mentioned, we had 2 very successful family literacy nights that was well attended and parents were
I just have a quick question. It's for Mr. Mansfield. Can you just comment on there was let's get a pretty significant, significantly more students who took the PSSAs in 23 compared to 22. Like you seem to be a bit of a jump. Just bigger class. Gotcha. Okay. Great.
We are bursting at the seams.
I had a quick question. Thanks for that. That was great. When you were talking about growth earlier, a year's growth in a year's time, I assume is the target you're looking to hit, given, wherever the achievement of the student starts to where they finish. Is that in any way, just question, is that in any way weighted for the raw achievement level of students you're starting with? Because potentially, are you expecting therefore to see if they are at a advanced level from where they are currently, are you looking for more than a year's growth in a year's time because of the ability of that student to pick up that knowledge? Obviously, if you were reading, for instance, at a 3rd grade level in 1st grade, is it still a measure of a year's growth in a year's time? Are you looking for more than that? Is that? Okay. Okay.
So we're progress monitoring depending on which tier they're in, weekly or bi-weekly. We're evaluating the program they're in. We're meeting with the teachers, and really we're looking for growth. What STAR does for us specifically is it gives us student growth percentile measures, and the typical growth for a student in a year's time is between 35 and 65. So we're looking at those numbers and saying, for the kids who need to grow more, we're expecting a
higher number than that. For a typical kid, we're expecting between that 35 and 65. STAR is very comparative to our PSSA, so when we look at the breakdown of how the proficiency and how they're doing, it usually aligns very closely with how we do on the PSSA.
Okay.
So we really do focus on that.
Great. Like a team level when you're analyzing the data of those individual students.
Yes, and our teachers all do student performance measures, so they all set that goal for all of their kids, whether they're advanced or below basic. And we evaluate that data in the middle of the year and then again at the end.
On an individualized basis. Great. Thanks. Yeah.
The beauty about STAR is it's standardized across. So it takes, like, if a first grader is on a third grade level, it compares them to other first graders in the country that are on third grade levels and how much did they.
Wonderful.
So it's not like an SAT where they scored 800 and everyone needs to be 850. Those kids may only get 810, and we say, wow, all these other kids only grew to 801, so they really grew so much more.
Great. Thanks. That's great to know that kind of analysis is going on too. Appreciate it.
For us, being the only year PSSA, we really look at STAR.
Yeah.
Anything at all?
I would use the space bar, but you can use either.
I understand. Okay. Sounds like it's back on. All right. Thank you, everyone. So we'll start off here with our Future Ready slide here. And I'll talk a little bit about growth and achievement. We do use PVOS starting in 4th grade through 6th. Here are PA Future Ready growth. Here are our PA Future Ready growth scores. We just missed our ELA target there. We met our math target and we exceeded our science target. The next slide is going to give us a closer look with the PVOS breakdowns, both by grade level and testing area. So here at the top, we see our math scores here. At the very top, we have significant evidence that the math standard was exceeded in 4th grade. That's the blue at the very top. Significant evidence that we were below the growth standard in 5th grade. That is the red one underneath. And then evidence that suggests we met the growth standard. And again, underneath 6th grade, evidence that we met the growth standard overall. And that translates to our Future Ready score. Underneath, we have our ELA scores. Overall, we were just below the standard. If you can see there at the very bottom, at the very bottom, we're looking at just below the standard in 4th grade. Significant evidence that we exceeded the standard in 5th, and significant evidence that we missed the standard or were well below the standard in 6th. At the very bottom there, you have our science score significantly exceeding expectations. So it's interesting here, and we're going to pair together because the next few slides are all achievement. But just to give you an idea as far as growth and achievement and where the two kind of connect. I'm going to refer to this number again, but there are 631 schools in Pennsylvania with 4th, 5th, and 6th grades under the same roof. 474 were able to meet the growth score for math, the growth score of 70, but only 33 of those would have a 70% pass rate or higher. 473 were able to meet the growth standard for ELA, but again, only 11 were able to meet an 80% pass rate. And for science, again, 394 are able to meet the growth standard, but only 4 have a pass rate of 90% or higher. And all of those pass rates are very close to our own. So matching a high achieving school with a high growing school is a lot more challenging than just meeting the growth standard. And you'll see in our achievement data, we do have high achieving areas in math and ELA, and especially in science. So here's our 6th grade math achievement.
Spaghetti, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Can I just ask you real quickly about the last slide? Otherwise, I
Yeah.
wouldn't interrupt you, but
there it is.
And I've been checking in and out of listening, so I might not exactly know what's going on. But well, look, you can't fire me. I mean, it's it. I don't gotta face the voters again. No, I've been listening, but what I checked out, I think I'm a little confused by the PVOS, but what I am looking at is the and I know that, you know, the different grades might, so I'm just curious if you have an idea, and if you don't, that's probably okay too. But when I look at the data here on the PSSA math in the 4th grade, you know, they're well above, and I think it might be because the growth is what's throwing me off, I suspect. But, you know, you have a well above in the 4th grade, and then you got absolutely well below in the 5th grade. And then you almost have like a reverse in the English, where now the 5th grade is well above, and you know, the 4th grade is then below. And I suspect maybe this has something to do because you're measuring, maybe it's the growth thing that I'm missing. Maybe that's what explains it. But do you have an idea of why it? Can you? And if you can't explain that,
No,
maybe you don't. Maybe you can't. But do you have an idea of why that is?
I can tell you that. So it's a unique challenge in that when you look at our quintile diagnostic, so when they break them down into fifths, achieving fifths.
Talk to me on a normal level.
Right, so the highest.
Dr. Serene understands that trash. I don't.
The highest achieving 20%.
Right.
Our school has about 100 students in each grade level in each testing area in that highest achieving 20%. So close to half of our students are in that highest 20%.
Right.
And given that, when you look at that group of 100 closer, you're going to see somewhere about 40% are in the 97th percent. So better than 97% of all other test takers.
Right.
And the closer you get to the 99th percentile, better than 99% of all test takers, we're talking about a raw score out of 52 that might be 51 or 50. So to show growth in PBOS year to year, you have to, if you're in that percentile, and we have so many that are, you have to score 50, 51, even if it's 47, you cannot go back. And I did look closely at individual growth scores, and it's amazing. We do have a few examples where a student scored 50 out of 52, and then the following year 49, it's a negative growth score.
Got it. Okay, that explains it. Thank you. Okay.
And so that is something that is unsettling, at least it tends to have big question the validity or the value of how informed what we do. Right? But I think, broadly speaking, over time, it does give us a sense of recognizing.
Yep. Hope that makes sense. Thank you.
So
isn't it the case, excuse me, isn't it the case that this growth analysis is more applicable toward schools that have lower achievement and they have much more room to grow? Is that a good way to put it? If you're at the upper levels, there's an incremental amount of growth that can happen because you're already at the upper echelon.
Given
right?
what I can
So
glean from
this
the
tool is not as useful here, is my point.
Then that's where the validity of the scale starts to break down. And now the claim is that the exam has a stretch, which is beginning to be at 52 and 49, 51, then it has insufficient stretch. So it's a complex question. I wouldn't want to diminish the importance of growing our top kids. However,
it's a unique challenge.
there are
So here's our 6th grade achievement data. As you can see, we're seeing that trend back upward to levels that we would have expected. So it's the third year of growth in our average achievement. There we go. And this is just a graphical representation. And what I like about this graph is you see the trending back toward an increased growth of students in both the proficient and advanced areas there in the blue and the green. Here is our year-to-year 6th grade ELA growth. Not much difference. It really is not a lot of variability, including instruction loss to health and safety measures that we took in 21 and on the way out of 21 into 22. So not a lot of change there. And again, the graphical representation not showing a lot of variability and an odd spike in 2021. The next is our 5th grade. Now, again, this was an area where we did not see growth, but our achievement now is growing for the 3rd consecutive year and back closer to our average achievement as far as pass rate is concerned. Again, a graphical representation showing that trend increases in the color or the shapes there for green and for blue, representing our proficient and advanced, or altogether our pass rate in 5th grade math. Here is our 5th grade ELA, where we saw a lot of growth, and then also with our 5th grade ELA, just some another nice trend that we're seeing here. Third straight year again, or another year of increase with our 5th grade ELA. And again, I think it should be pointed out that every time we meet or exceed expectations when it comes to growth, it's remarkable considering that our pass rate was something like 84.4%, which is extremely high across the state. And there's a graphic representation, again, increased sizes in those advanced and proficient areas. Data that we should be very proud of, this pass rate and advanced rate in science, the highest in the last 7 years. Simply put, our students crush this. And, and what's even more impressive, I feel like they're our youngest learners. This is now their 3rd subject. So they take this each week after the ELA assessment and a day after the math assessment. It's over 2 days. We don't change the schedule, and they do extremely well in it. I would attribute that to not only good instruction, but 45 minutes a day in science. There are not a lot of 4th grades statewide that feel like dedicate that amount of time. And again, the graphical representation of 4th grade science. Here is our 4th grade mathematics. In our 4th grade mathematics, there's relative to pass rate here. We're not too far off of our 7-year high. So we did very well as far as pass rate. Again, remarkable that we're also seeing incredible growth in our 4th grade math. Here's the graphical representation again, going back to 19. And finally, our 4th grade ELA, where we did not see a growth here or strong growth here, but as far as 4th grade ELA is concerned, not a lot of change in score. We're talking about a maximum pass rate of 82 and a minimum of 76 over the last few years. And then there's our graphical representation kind of showing that lack of variability. And finally, here are actual steps, and I would just go back to my numbers that I shared with you earlier on the 631 schools in Pennsylvania. So if you combine growth and achievement with our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, River Intermediate School is one of only 9 schools in Pennsylvania that would have a pass rate of 60, 70, and 90, or above 60, 70, and 90 for math and ELA and science, respectively, and also combined with growth scores of 70, 60, and 90 in math, ELA, and science, respectively. So one of only 9 schools in Pennsylvania to be able to combine those two growth standards, two measurements of growth standard and achievement measures. Interestingly enough, we are 1 percentage point away from meeting our goal, 1 percentage point away from a pass rate of 70, 1 percentage point away from pass rate. I'm telling you all this because if we get those 1%, we would be 1 of 3 in Pennsylvania, combining all those scores. So certainly room to grow, but pretty good stuff so far, and very proud of the students, the staff, the families, and all the support that they put in, all the time they put in to make sure that our students have the absolute best opportunity to both achieve and grow on these assessments. With that, I will take some more questions.
I have a question. It's not directed at you, Mr. McGinty, but more of an overall. I think I remember when you presented this, Dr. Trinkle, earlier, I think it was this academic year, like you talked about the data, the PSSAs, I think, as well, early on in the fall. It just seems, and I don't know if it's hard to draw conclusions because there's variability year to year and in grade by grade levels, that type of thing. But it seems that overall, math tends to be the one that is lower in terms of achievement, and also that it's the one that jumps around a little bit more. It seems like looking at the numbers, there's more consistency in those that are in our overall proficient proficiency numbers and looking at it. So, I'm just wondering if there's an overall plan when it comes to curriculum. I think you've hinted at it a little bit already. I know the elementary teachers, principals did mention it as well, but I'm just curious, what is the overall plan? Because it seems like that's an area that across the board is, and I know it's coming up. I looked ahead at the middle school level too. So just curious, because we have Wit and Wisdom now, which sounds great, and we're doing it at 7 through 12 too. We have a plan. So I'm just, correct. Right. So do we think it's just like a foundational thing, perhaps? Okay. Because we all know like math builds, right? So.
I have a question too, but it's not specifically for Mr. McGinty. Although no, who knows? So maybe we need to look at whoever's writing our science books and get their version of a math book. But that's kind of my question is there something drastically different that we're doing in science, that our scores in science are incredible across the board, but the rest, they all fluctuate? And what's warranting those awesome science scores? Well, I mean, but even in the who else did we test in science? What other grade is it? It's fourth and middle school, because they were crazy high at the middle school too.
Band, but we do the most tests in the middle. Fantastic staff, fantastic counselors, fantastic students and families supporting our students. And you see that in a lot of our growth. So I put our building score comparison up there. This score is based upon the academic achievement and academic growth, as well as attendance measures. So if you look at all of the local counties that are listed up there, you can see that we've actually moved up. We're now in 4th place. And that's comparing our growth and our achievement and our attendance. So when I compare us to Northwestern Lehigh Middle School, which is the top one, their growth is higher than ours, but their achievement is lower. And that's that constant battle that we fight, where we have higher achievement, but then maybe not as much growth. This slide shows our value added. Mine is sorted a little bit differently than Mr. McGinty's. So you can see on there, I have the 7th graders looped together. So you can see that group as a class, and then the 8th graders looped together, and you can see that group as a class. The other thing I added on here that's slightly different is I have the achievement scores. Now that achievement score isn't a percentile, it's actually the normal curve equivalent. So what that tells us is where they fall on the normal curve. It's not that they're at 67 percentile rank, but where they fall on the normal curve. If you remember from statistics in high school and you've got the IQ score where most people fall in the middle, we are at the very top end of that middle hump. Okay, if that makes sense. So on here, you can see that our 7th graders grew successfully in math and in ELA. We're in the green for both. And their scores are close to the same in terms of the achievement and the entry and exit for the NCEs, the normal curve equivalent. In 8th grade, you can see that our PSSA math was slightly below, but our language arts and our science were both in the green. If you look a little closer at the PSSA math, that score is one of our highest scores at the 67 NCE equivalent. And I'll show that kind of on the next slide to give you an idea of where it falls. Math is very challenging in middle school because it's where the great separation happens. Really, you see a hyper accelerated and accelerated course, and kids are taking both the Keystone, which is at the bottom, and the 8th grade PSSA. So at the bottom, you can see our PSSA scores, which were in the blue. So we've actually achieved and grown those highest achievers in that blue. The next slide, this is that visual representation of the normal curve equivalent. And you can see that we are at the top end of, just in general terms, I kind of averaged them and put them on there. There's only about 16% of people that are higher than us in terms of where we fall on that normal curve equivalent. The next slide shows our advanced scores. And again, when we compare this to those buildings that are achieving higher than us on growth, we have significantly higher advanced scores than most of those buildings. So we've actually increased by 10% the number of students that are achieving an advanced level in the English curriculum or in the English assessment, and 12% in the science assessment. We've gone down a smidgen of a point, about 2% in the math. Now, we're going to start with English and language arts. You can see that we're both in green for growth and achievement on there. Some of the things to notice on there also are that we are looking at a new curriculum for next year to continue our growth with our students because we're meeting them and continuing the growth, but we want to always continue to challenge ourselves. Our new schedule that we implemented at the start of this year has also opened up more opportunities to really meet the needs of the students who are struggling in our language arts. So our reading specialist is more available to grab kids during Spartan periods and provide interventions and really fill those gaps in that we're seeing. On this graph, it's a very similar graph to what you saw for the K through 3 and the intermediate school. But what I did was I added a red line at the state average. So if you were to estimate where the state average was, and this is where the green line for the state would end. That's kind of where it falls. So it's the state average of where the green is. We significantly outpace that all the way through. So the state average for proficient and advanced is 54% in ELA for 7th grade. Ours was 71.4%. And we are catching up. We have a little bit of a jump there with a different cohort of kids, as you can see, but we're catching up and we're, again, implementing that new ELA curriculum to really try and address that. In 8th grade ELA, you can see, again, the state average is on there, and the state average shows the 54.5%. Ours was 74.9%, staying very close to where we've been, but decreasing that below basic category. As we move on to the more day-to-day information, this is our IXL growth. So this is instead of looking back a year at what those students scored, this is what we're looking at on a regular basis. And we're going to talk about this more. But between marking periods 1 and 2, we look at the growth of our students in math and in ELA. And in 7th grade math, our students, 89% of our students showed significant growth between those 2 marking periods. In ELA, 90% of our 7th graders showed significant growth from their first one in the beginning of the year to just recently, a week ago, they took the second one. In 8th grade, 89% of our students showed significant growth in math. That's that blue line that's growing. And 72% showed significant growth in language arts. This shows a little bit more. This is one of the IXL data points. It gives us the number of skills that students have mastered, which means they've gotten 100% on that skill, and they've achieved proficiency on. So 12,000 skills they've achieved proficiency on. That means they got 80% or higher on that SMART score. So if you have kids at home that have done IXLs and they're trying to achieve a SMART score, you've probably heard the frustration with this because it adapts with the kids. So if they get a question wrong on a particular skill, it repeats and gives them more of those questions to build that SMART score. So when they're achieving the proficiency and the mastery, it's really demonstrating that they know it. They didn't just get one question right. They got multiple questions right that showed that growth. Okay. Now we're moving on to math. So our math is in the red. And this is where it gets really tricky. So when you get to middle school, you have in 6th grade at the IS is the first opportunity for students to move up to an accelerated math class. That's essentially the pre-algebra 7th grade class. When they move to 7th grade, then if they're taking algebra 1, that's like a 2-step advanced class. So they're not seeing the standards that are typical for 7th grade. They're seeing the standards that are typical for 9th grade. And our teachers work really hard to cyclically kind of bring those standards back around. But if you're learning algebra concepts, you may not be covering mean, median, and mode. That's a typical 7th grade concept. Okay, so we see huge gains in our students in those areas, but that's the focus. Our focus is that achievement on the Keystone because it's a graduation requirement. The PSSA is kind of filtered in for them, but it's not the focus of those students. So some of the things that we've done just this year to address these standards, and you can see that our percent proficient or advanced is 50.9. The state average is only 38%. When you look at other middle schools, this is very typical across the state, even to the ones that are outpacing us in terms of the building score. We're actually way above them in proficient and advanced students. But what we've done this year is really increased our Title I services. So Title I supports students that are struggling. We are Title I targeted math school. So it addresses those students who are struggling in math, and we use the data on IXL and STAR to identify them. This year, we have 92 students who were offered Title I services. That's 46 at each grade level, which is about 20% of our students. So those 20% of students who are struggling the most in math are the ones we're targeting with that Title I service. And that service includes small group instruction on specific skills every 3 days. So we do an ABC schedule. Those students are pulled to get additional small group instruction in math every 3 days on the areas that they're struggling in. Also, in terms of growth, if you look at the image to the right, we only missed our growth and our green by 1 percentage point. So that's one student who didn't make it is impacting us getting green versus red. So we're very close there. Okay. Here is the 7th grade achievement in math. State average, again, 38%. You can see if the green lines for the state were to end, it would end where that red bar is, and ours keeps going. So part of what we did this year and what we were intentional about was implementing that new and expanded schedule that allowed our Title I teacher to pull more kids, which is where we want to reach those students that are at the bottom, that 20% that really needs the additional support. So we're hoping to see a lot of growth from that. In 8th grade, you can see kind of the same thing. 8th grade is where we're seeing more of the decrease in the below basic students. But again, we are continuing to grow our proficient and advanced students every year, the last 3 years, and decrease that number that's in the below basic category. Okay. Now, here is kind of a visual representation of those highest students. And this is where our challenge comes in. So 8th graders will take a science PSSA, a math PSSA, an English language arts PSSA, and potentially an Algebra 1 test. The entire month of April, they're being tested, which is a lot. And our teachers work really hard to keep kids motivated, but it's tough. And our focus is on this keystone. So you can see on this keystone, kind of, I'll echo Mr. McGinty, we crushed this. 95% of our kids who take the keystone and are in those advanced classes are getting proficient and advanced. And they are about 40% of our 8th graders are in some sort of advanced math pathway, which is super exciting. But again, if a student is in geometry in 8th grade, they're covering geometry concepts. That is not the same as the 8th grade standards. So we use IXL to cycle that around and really try to hit them. but it's a big difference between an 8th grade standard and a geometry standard that they're teaching to. And our teachers try to match the high school geometry class as close as possible. They take the same final because we want our kids to come to the high school and be able to continue that.
Can I just ask a quick question? So are they doing poorer on the PSSAs then? Is that what I'm
So
hearing?
the focus just isn't on the PSSA. So they may not show the growth on the PSSA because they're already at the top and we're focusing on the geometry and the algebra. Typically those students, the students you're seeing on this keystone, when we sort it by kid, are still getting proficient. They may not be getting advanced. So we're seeing the growth here.
Yeah.
They're doing better on algebra.
Right.
The harder tests, the PSSAs, which are not as hard,
Gotcha.
because they're pushing up.
Right.
And I think if there's any lower score we can live with, we can actually embrace it and say that one is okay. Because they're doing really well in the math they're taking, which is a little higher than what they would otherwise.
And that's 100 kids in 7th and 8th grade. So it's a large number of our students. It kind of sabotages Mr. Miller at the high school because they don't get these kids on their keystones. But yes, we'll take that. Our science, again, is outstanding. As Mrs. Gangware said, we are really crushing it in science too. We have all groups exceeding the goal for achievement, and our growth is exactly where it's supposed to be. If you look at the next slide, you can see the breakdown there. According to the state, the average is 58.9%. Our average is 85% of our kids are proficient or advanced in science. And the number that is below basic is decreasing every year. So we're really excited about our science work. Now, to make it a little bit more scalable, I gave just a more specific example of what teachers are looking at on a daily basis. So our teachers participate in team meetings and what we call DAP meetings, Data Action Plan meetings, every week. And this is my child. This is my son, Bobby. So you can see on here, this is exactly, I took it right from a spreadsheet that teachers are using. This is the data that they see. So they'll see the students' ELA and math scores on their spring star from last year, their PSSA score, and they're all color-coded, their text-dependent analysis score, and then how far they are to proficient according to PVOS, like what the estimation is, and then what their Lexile is and what their marking period 1 star is. So based on that information, teachers are looking at the data, and this student was referred for Title I services and is also receiving a small group remedial 7th grade language arts class. Okay, so we look at this data, and that's how we make recommendations for courses also. Then we pull up their projection on PVOS, and that tells us that where they are expected to perform without intervention on each of the upcoming tests and subjects. So you can see on here that this student is more likely to get proficient on their language arts than they are in the math. So they know that we need to pull this kid and offer interventions in order to help grow them in that area of math. Okay. If we dig even deeper, this is part of the data that we get on eMetrics, you can see students score in each of the tested areas, and you can target areas that are particularly low. For instance, key ideas and details, knowledge of language, grammar. And then when we take that data, which again, this is one snapshot from one test, and we compare it to the IXL data that we have, which shows us that student score in their language level, where their strengths are in IXL, it gives us actionable steps and recommended skills that we can focus on. Teachers can work on the students with, or they can work independently on.
Ms. Webb,
Yes.
you said that teachers can see that too?
Teachers
That last
see
slide?
this. Mhm.
Amazing.
Yeah, so when we do data plans, we pull up individual kids to see what are we going to do during our Spartan period to help that student grow specific to the kid. So on this one, you can see, and this is kind of the overall level, like their overall language arts score was 570, their reading level was 570, but they are much stronger in their writing and in their vocabulary, but they need work on the grammar and mechanics, which matched what we saw in the PSSA. So we take this data, and this is constantly updating as they work on IXL so that teachers get constant feedback, and we use that to then game plan. And if we look based on what we've done for this particular kid for marking period 1 to marking period 2, they've actually grown 17 points in their star. They've grown in their ELA for star. They have grown 55 points in their math star score because of that Title I intervention. And then you can see the IXL scores. We estimate 100 points for a year's growth And this child has already grown 120 in ELA, and they've also grown 80, almost a year's worth in math in the first marking period. So that's the targeted data that we use on a daily basis to really try and meet the kids. And whereas the PVOS, the Future Ready, the PSSA stuff is a snapshot in time.
Can I,
Any questions? Yep.
would a parent have access to that?
When we meet with parents, like if they have questions about their child's data, we bring all of this up. Mhm.
Can I ask you a quick question? Thanks. And explaining how this is addressed throughout the school day was really helpful too. I heard you mentioning Spartan period frequently. Can you explain, because Spartan period has kind of changed. It means different things in different buildings, and it also means different things throughout the years at the middle school. So
Right.
are there periods of Spartan periods that are intervention for all students, regardless of where they fall? And then there are other Spartan periods that are like whatever club we're used to hearing about signing up for,
So it's
et cetera,
actually
or is it
different? Yes. This club Spartan period would be more the high school model.
Right.
So the way that the middle school is doing it this year is that every team has their own Spartan periods. There's 4 different periods throughout the day that are considered Spartan periods. And then students are grouped flexibly in that period in areas they may need support in or enrichment in. So then they're working on IXL, they're doing additional projects. Teams may be doing team rewards during that time, but then that's the time when they can get pulled out for the interventions or our gifted teachers pushing in and offering enrichment. And we're really using it as kind of a way to, like a win is what they used to call it at the elementary level, a way to reach the kids and give them what they need.
Okay, great. So same term, but means different things in different buildings. Thanks for explaining that. And my only other question was with the IXL program. Yes, I think we're familiar with the groans. Two questions. One was when you were mentioning the test for the first quarter, second quarter growth. When do they start being exposed to that? Is there anything to be said for the first quarter they're getting used to how they're being tested on that system in the middle school? Is it different at all? Or is it the same as it was before between first and second? Because then when you hit that second, do you see less growth between second and third quarter because you're not learning how to take the test, you're just testing?
Not so much.
Okay.
I mean, they have access to IXL at the intermediate
I just didn't know if
school,
it was different. That
but
just seems
it's-
like such a
it's-
steep growth curve. That's wonderful.
that,
I was just
yeah.
curious.
Not every kid has that much growth. This one's getting a lot of intervention, but we're looking for a growth of about 20 to 25 in each marking period.
Okay.
And it's a diagnostic that then, as it collects more data, gives you more accurate numbers.
Great. And last question, thanks. With IXL, because it's such an amazing tool, but it also is in the minds of many, especially teenagers in this district, just a curse, and you will hear them groaning about. Has there been anything experimented with or talked about, two kids who are given the same assignment, one who will get it right away and not have that repetition and go back and relearn. So one child might be facing, 30 minutes of work on the program, and another child could be facing 3 hours of work on the program. Has there been any discussion about how that can be, especially if it's assigned as a homework, like we talk about work-life balance in our adult lives, but is there any discussion about how that's being addressed either in the classroom or from a homework perspective? I know it's something that parents struggle with, and I hear kids struggle with as well. How is that? Is there
So the message that and there's different standards. So if you're in an advanced math class, you're expected to hit a higher SMART score than if you're in a regular math class. Same for honors ELA and regular ELA. But most of it is done during the day, during Spartan periods. When we look at the breakdown, and IXL gives us that breakdown of how much is done at home, how much is done during the school day. Most of it should be done during the day. If they're going home, the message that teachers are giving students is if it takes you more than 20 to 30 minutes, just stop. Stop at that point, come in the next day, let me know, and we'll give you additional interventions. I have had kids come in and say, oh, well, I did the wrong one, but because IXL gives you the directions as to how to solve those questions, they're like, but I just finished it anyway, because I looked at the directions and went through the steps. So there's benefits both ways.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as that's an awareness, because I know that
It shouldn't
that's been
be
a struggle.
3 hours trying to hit that 80.
Right. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Bring it home, Mr. Miller. He's on the clock.
I will do my best to be done for the Bills game, I promise. So good evening, everyone. So just a little bit to piggyback off with the high school. The high school is in a very different situation. While every other building goes off grade-based, we go off a cohort for 11th grade. So while our students can take tests in 9th, 10th, 11th grade, They aren't recorded until the 11th grade year. So our scores do vary a little bit. We do look at our E-metric score, and as you can see from our first E-metric score, which is Algebra 1 Keystone, this is a combination of scores that were taken in 7th and 8th grade when the students were in Mrs. Webb's building and when they're currently in my building at the high school. So that's why we call it the SLSD total. It shows where our overall students are, and it gives our entire cohort for the 11th grade year. If we look at the breakdown of it and look at the high school itself, the high school is where we have all the students who already have taken it, and this is just our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders in their cohort. As you can see, we understand there's some deficiencies in our Algebra 1. We've already started some corrective actions with how we're doing remediation plans, how we're doing our data processing with where we are with Algebra 1 and what we can do to remove these deficiencies as we continue to work forward. In terms of biology Keystone, we are actually doing pretty well despite the changes in tests that are coming and the new curriculum updates that are going along in terms of steals, which is going to be a mandate for the 2025 school year. We are still above the state average. Again, this was one of the hard parts. We had a 69% proficiency score for our interim target, and it was 72. We're missing it by 1 to 2 students. So we're close. We understand those deficiencies, looking at individual data and looking at individualized items on the modules as well. In terms of our ELA Keystone, we are doing extremely well, well above the state average, and continuing to grow all of our students with our pathways. The addition of Study Sync, which you just approved at our last meeting, I think will help us with their final little bit of pieces in curriculum for our 7 through 11 cohorts to help them grow this and help reduce our below basic and our basics even more as we continue to move forward. We did add PVOS in here just to talk about growth. Again, for us at the high school, our growth is a little bit harder because our students are already achieving very well in certain levels, and we have now gone to where they are academically in aptitude. So if we look at us in a total district standpoint for our 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, we are growing all of our Algebra 1, our biology, and our literature students. Even with the removal of our high flyers that were already taking these exams down with the middle school, our math and our science and our literature are all still well exceeding in terms of growth. Again, it's a little bit of a different beast because we are on cohort based, not on individual grade based, but as an overall school, we're still doing very well. What I would like to highlight is things that aren't in our forward-facing report card, and those are things that we do at the high school. One of those things is our graduation rate. Our graduation rate has been exceptional the past couple of years, and last year was one of our best years. On our 4-year graduation rate, not accounting for students with IEPs or deferment, we had 95%, and with those students who deferred for 1 extra year for training at LCTI or getting additional supports for OVR to move off and have their actual life-based training, we were at 97%, which is one of the highest in the area and definitely one of the best in the state as well. Looking at our senior outlook, we looked at what our 4-year colleges and our 4-year transition piece. We had 71 students last year report that they were going off to either a 4-year school or less than 4-year school. And when we combine that with our military and our workforce-based reply, we had 89.2% of our 265 students giving us a clear measure of where they were going after graduation, meaning that we're having students actually get career goals in mind. They were preparing for the life beyond our 4 walls, and they were going to be successful in the process as well. If you look at our attendance, which Dr. Trinkle had alluded to earlier, our attendance for 2023 was around 91.4%, which is based on state measures, putting us well within track for interim targets. We also looked at a subgroup of this. This came up last year from the board. We want to make sure we highlight it this year, and we did some digging. Our LCTI students are a very important subgroup, which help drive our school calendar and are very important in their work-based placement. We average around a 95% for their placement and their time at LCTI. They are coming to school. They want to be there. We're helping get them the career training they need to be successful well beyond our walls. The 2 other items I want to make sure we brought up this year that we didn't talk about as much last year, but wanted to bring forward are the 2 most recent acts put on high schools in terms of graduation. Act 339, which is our college and career path artifacts. We met 100% last year where every student had met all of their requirements required by the state. And then this is the first year of what was required, Act 158, graduation pathway reporting. We had a 100% proficiency where every student met one of the 7 pathways, no waivers and no Keystone diplomas, which are the exceptions to what the state mandated for us. So we actually had all students meet those pathways moving forward. In terms of some of our other highlights that don't always show up in our forward-facing report card, we did have a national merits. Last year was one of our highest years where we had 7 semifinalists and 7 commended. For this 2023 school year, we've already had 1 student registered as a semifinalist and 4 commended. Our 1 semifinalist is in the heat to see if he'll become a finalist, which we won't know until February. And as for our SAT scores continue to thrive when we look at essay and non-essay. When you look at the average recently, especially after COVID, most schools are scoring around the 580 mark for the essay and around 555 for the math part with essay. So we're still well within range and above when we compare ourselves to other school districts with our SAT work. In terms of our AP scores, this was a highlight from last year. We added multiple AP testers last year, almost 40 more than the previous year. And we actually grew in all of our 5s, 4, and 3 scores, meaning our students are able to actually transfer college credits to their academic adventures, which is something we're really proud of, that our students are achieving with these high college level exams and able to take college credits with them when they're leaving the high school. Lastly is dual enrollment. Dr. Mann has brought this up multiple times. We want to make sure we highlight this for all of you. We've gone to a little bit of change in our tracking process. In the 21-22 school year, it was registered by courses, but we realized students can take multiple courses and inflate that number. We're more concerned with our students. Our students find the way to have achievement here, earn credits, and as you can see, when looking at our LTRI-C, Seton Hall, and University of Pitt connections, we've had growth in the number of students taking those courses, and we've even bumped up those courses. At the end of this year and for next year, we'll be able to present our connection with RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. We've just signed with them, and we'll be able to know if anyone's taking those credits and moving forward after the end of the school year. So that's it for the high school in a nutshell. How can I help with answer any questions? That's a first. Dr. Trinkle, it's back to you.
Actually, Dr. Silometto will just give you a preview on what we're doing as far as professional development. And then that will be the conclusion of this presentation.
So, looking ahead, the reason why we look at all of this data is, of course, to think about how it impacts what we do with our students on a day-to-day. And so this data in its sum total provides us with a really valuable set of information to drive the curricular decisions that we make with the goal of helping our students continue to achieve and continue to grow. So what you see here are a list of current curricular initiatives in the works based upon student need and also grounded, of course, in the data. When data and curriculum work hand in hand, we see results. And a perfect example of that, there are many that were discussed tonight, but a perfect example of that would be going back to what Dr. Chromiak and Mr. Mansfield talked about at the beginning of the principal presentation, where we implemented foundations and geos last year, and we are already starting to see less students qualify for interventions. That's really powerful, and that's because of the close work that we do, examining the data, making sure that we put the data into practice, the hard work of our teachers, all of these efforts. So we need to make sure that we keep that in mind, that the reason that we spend so much time on data are for things like that, to make sure that we do what's right for kids and make sure that we are doing what is helping them grow and see those results. Oh, so that was the slide about curriculum. This is the slide. They looked so similar. So this is the one about professional development, which I have very similar things to say. So it sort of works. So the other arm of this is that we want to make sure that we're not just providing our teachers with the materials that they need to help our students grow and achieve, but we want to make sure that we are giving them the professional development and the training required to help their students achieve and grow to their fullest potential. So what you see here are some ongoing and future professional development initiatives in place based upon curricular need and, of course, grounded in the data. So thank you for your attention as we went through all of that. I know that that was a lot of data, but it's great data and it's really important information. And so as Dr. Trinkle said at the beginning of our evening tonight, this really is our main event. We have many, many things to be proud of here in Southern Lehigh School District, but always great work ahead. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank the administration, the staff, and all the teachers for their hard work in getting these programs up and going. It's hard when you're working in parallel on teaching and developing and analyzing. So I appreciate it. It looks like there's a lot of great things here when it comes to feedback and continuous improvement. So thanks for that.
Without being redundant, I will echo Mr. Maud's comments. Thank you for all of your hard work, an exceptional presentation of exceptional work done well. Okay, moving
Can I
on.
just speak? Can I make just one
Oh,
comment?
sure. Go ahead.
Regarding the dual enrollment, I think it's something that's a wonderful opportunity for our students. I think there's one course, I believe, I forget the name of the course, I apologize, but I believe all sophomores take this course.
Yes.
All 10th graders take that course. So I would love to see that registration, as close to 100% as possible, in the future, just to
Yes.
get the word out that all 10th graders will take this course.
It's semester based, but
Right,
this is the
right,
first year for
that's
that.
right, that's right.
So we'll be able to track that and provide
Great.
updates into at the conclusion of this year, but even into next year. Mr. Miller did spearhead that initiative to provide that initial
That's great. Thank
opportunity
you.
for dual enrollment at the 10th grade level to increase our numbers eventually to get, all students can have an opportunity and access that, which is our hope for all students in our high school. So we wanted to start as early as we could in 10th grade, and we were even looking backwards into 9th and 8th grade.
And I have to say, I have a 10th grader, and I've seen the communication, I believe, really improve dramatically over this year. So I'm seeing that improvement, personally, and I want to congratulate the administration. I just want to keep that ball rolling. So thank you.
The only point I would also like to make finally, is that all the things that you see here are resource intensive. And we have come to the board in the last 3 years, and we have asked we've had many requests from foundations to Wit and Wisdom to the Fund. Yes, so I am very grateful to have the opportunity to work with the board that is so supportive of the work that our administrators, that our teachers, our families, and our students do. And just as we talk about, there is clearly great work that's going on. I mean, that's just a fact, but that work is powered and financed by this Board of Education that has been nothing but extremely supportive of every single one of our efforts. And we are all grateful to the board for that. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about graduation on May 31st, 2024. Can I have a motion to approve the license agreement with Lehigh University?
So moved.
Any comments or questions?
I just wanted, I've personally have fielded a number of questions from community members. A lot of them have said, I thought that our graduation was going to start being at our new stadium. And I know that we have reasons for it not being at our stadium. And I was just wondering if you could review that for the community.
Sure. First, if we said we must have graduation at the stadium, I think it would be okay. In fact, it might even be great. All right. However, as we have opened the stadium this year, we have encountered periodic challenges with the scoreboard, particularly with respect to the video and some of the audio interface there. We know that graduation has to be perfect. Right? We cannot have a problem with graduation. If we have a problem with an 8th grade football game, that's regrettable. If we have it with our graduation, that is intolerable. The second part of this is that as we have started the fall this year, administration's entire attention has been on opening the stadium, handling the challenges, doing all this type of things to get the stadium ready for our football season. It's been really great. I will tell you that the planning that would be involved in getting the graduation to the stadium with respect to chairs and rentals and schedules and all the things that would happen is very substantial. And our administration, and we also have to engage the students in this conversation as well, because I think we don't want it to be a foregone conclusion that we want to go to the stadium if the students themselves and their families are all excited about Lehigh University, for example. Now, we could not reach out to our students and families early in the fall because of all the things that were going on. We just want to make sure we get on the turf. So if we're able and we find a willingness to have our graduation at the stadium not this graduation, but the following one, we will begin working on it probably in August and September, so that we have a flawless ceremony to really respect the great work of our seniors and our senior families. And we thought that while it was not beyond the realm of possibility to do it this year, we thought the most prudent, wise approach would be to have it at Lehigh University, where it is a great facility and everyone does come off with a very positive experience there. And then we look very much forward to next year to having, another option before us.
Thank you. All in favor? Or did you want to say something, Mr. Demick?
I was going to boo. I just, I mean, I respect that. Obviously, I understand it. I would very, very much like to see this class graduate here in Coopersburg, or Center Valley, I should say. I've never been a fan of Lehigh University. Nothing is, let me be clear on that. I've never been a fan of having this at another facility, whatever facility that is. I appreciate Lehigh University giving us this opportunity. Obviously, I have nothing against Lehigh. But I just feel strongly, and maybe I'm just a throwback. And to your point, Dr. Mann, I think it would be important to have the input of the students. That's probably the people that we should be listening to the most on it. But I would guess, maybe I'm wrong, but at least from my perspective, I would really like to see our classes begin to graduate here at the high school in our hometown. I think, especially given the venue, and I know things can go wrong, and I could even know that the school board would go wrong. If it was my family or if it was my daughter and I was going, I think I'd rather watch a flawed event here than a perfect event at some other venue. That's just how much I think it's important to graduate from the place you went to school, that that you shared football games and band events and phys ed classes or whatever. I think that, at least if I was a student, that would mean a lot to me. So I'm a little disappointed. I understand the reasoning, Dr. Mann. This is not a criticism. And again, I just won't be here to vote on this in the future. So it's my last shot to put in a little bit of a plug. I just think it's really important that at least maybe for next year that we get this done. It sounds like we're on course to do that. I hope we will. And I'm a little disappointed, but not at anybody's doing, other than I wish we could get this done for the kids and then the families that'll be involved this spring. Thank you.
And I'll say a couple of words because I agree exactly with Jeff. I think having it here, maybe not this coming spring, but in future years, is important. And I can say that our oldest daughter graduated in 2012 in the gymnasium. The issue with that was you couldn't have all of your family members necessarily there. But it was, maybe next to Becky's Drive-In of 2020, one of the best graduations that I've attended, having had two at Lehigh, one here and one at Becky's, which I commend the administration in 2020 for pulling that off, because they did it in rather short order and they still found a way to make something that was not necessarily desirable really a pleasant experience. And I think graduation, being here, not dealing with the traffic of getting to Lehigh and everything that goes with that, would be a much better experience overall. Plus, it's where they spent their time. And being here in that stadium and being with your family and in the community that you accomplished everything, I think just culminates that experience in a way that they can't do at Lehigh. It's a nice facility, but it's not the same. So I'd like to see it here.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay. Mr. Pepe.
There we go. Hey, first of all, as a numbers and data person, our building principals, outstanding presentation. Because not only was it very informative, but it's great data to chart, graph, and analyze. Congratulations. So first of all, I had an update on the item that came up during the public about the auditorium. On Tuesday, October 31st, Mr. Rohrbach, he had given me this update. He met with Chris Suma and Josh Miller and Lisa Foley, student representative of the theater department. The objective of their meeting was to investigate any needs that the auditorium had with regards to maintenance and/or IT. And the lighting was found to be in good working order since the recent repairs were made. They have one spotlight, and the second spotlight continues to be rented as the need rises for, basically because of the cost of the repair is too high and it really outweighs the option to purchase. The cost to rent is $750. The cost for new is $7,000. So at this point, renting seems to be the option. The amp for the middle speakers was found to be off and is not fixable. Mr. Suma ordered this part, which will be installed, which will mean that the speakers will be in working order, and I believe that's going to happen shortly, if it hasn't already happened. Okay. And I think that's about it. Was there anything to add to that, Mr. Rohrbach? Correct. So, and those were some of the items that were asked about what could be done, quickly, and that was done. So
just thank you
Mhm.
very much, because you knew I was going to bring it up last meeting. But the mics with respect to the wires, can you explain that a little bit more? Just because
they were cutting out,
Right.
and what they found, I believe, is some of the wiring was bad and was replaced.
so it's
and then
wiring
they
not
got
directly
additional-
attached to said mics, but
Mhm.
rather the
Yep.
connect, like
and
the
then they-
transmission.
Correct.
Okay, I'm not an electrician, but okay.
And then they got additional wires as backup, Priya.
Okay.
So this way, if they go bad in the future or during a performance, they have already available.
And
to
we'll
switch
have
it
the
out.
opportunity to install and test well in advance of the next production,
That
I would
be
hope.
my expectation. Yeah, they're all nodding yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nope. And thanks for bringing that to our attention.
I just have one quick thing to add on to that. I just have a question as to how this, let's say, elevation of issues from a facility standpoint changes so that these things don't linger. If they were lingering, I guess is my question. Were they lingering? And if so, why? And if in the future, just from corrective action, how they get addressed more quickly, right?
Absolutely. I think with any program, if there's a deficiency or an issue, usually it's reported up, whether it's something that goes on a work order through IT or through facilities maintenance and or to building principal. And then once we're informed of it, then we take action, go down there and check it out. Just like if you remember, I think it was a year ago, we had an issue with the ADA compliance of the bathroom in the nurse's office, and we remedied that in-house with the maintenance team rather quickly. Okay, so then I'm
Thanks.
going
And for the record, we discussed this in the facility meeting.
correct. So now I'm just going to move on to the business. The business is actually pretty light this month, 892,000. Usually it's running around 1.1 mil. 42% of that is transportation. That's 268,000 with Christ and 158,000 with Norman's. You'll see on there HSA mechanical for 17,000. That was Liberty Bell. That was again a repair to one of the boilers. Last year, I believe we had a repair to the other boiler. So at this point, they're pretty operational. LCTI, you see our commitment there, $124,000. You'll see Miller Flooring for $22,000. That was for recoating the tennis court, and that was also covered by the insurance. We actually were pretty quick on the trigger. We got the insurance back before we had to pay the bill. $25,000 Petroleum Traders. That's again diesel as part of our cooperative bid through the county. You'll see there was an insurance, school district insurance, $17,000 600. That's through the SDIC. That's for workers' compensation. Again, it's a pool that we belong to, and they're running very, very well. Outside of that, that was pretty much it. And what else we have? Act One. The Act One index is, believe it or not, up to 5.3%. And this resolution is saying that we are not going to exceed that. As a matter of fact, as we continue to work and we're just getting started on budget, we're going to try and do our job to bring the budget in respectfully well below that.
Can I have a motion to approve the bills list and the resolution with regard to Act One? Any other questions or comments for Mr. Pepe? Mr. Deming? Oh, you look, yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, those are approved. Dr. A. Little.
Madam President, we have 2 items for consideration for the HR section. The first is an engagement letter with Jeffrey Sultanic, who's an attorney at the firm of Fox Rothschild. We presented 3 attorneys to the negotiations committee. All 3 of them presented about the collective bargaining process, and the committee was unanimous in promoting for recommendation Mr. Sultanic. So this is the engagement letter with his firm. It's exclusively for collective bargaining as opposed to any other endeavor. So that is the engagement letter itself. The second is the report, which is standard for our meetings. We have an appointment. We actually have a promotion of Shannon Williams, who's currently our accountant, to the position of Assistant Director of Business and Finance. We have the appointment of 2 classified staff. We have extracurricular and ancillary. You'll notice in red, we're having corrections for 2 stipends. One was a stipend that was actually being paid out now for work that was done in March of 2023. And the other is an individual who was originally going to have a colleague that was going to assist with an activity, but that colleague is not doing it anymore. So that person's share has gone from 50% to 100%. We have a volunteer coach for swimming and diving. We have a student teacher from nursing who is interested in shadowing us, which is always great because school nurses are a premium. So it is great to have folks who are interested in learning more about our institution before hopefully committing to come here. We have homework club. These are homework club staff, as well as substitutes. We got 3 more individuals, 2 of which are sub teachers. So we can always use substitute as another premium staff. We have the amendment to the existing contract. Then we have the Act 93 agreement. Actually, it relates to item D, which is Sue Knoll, who is currently our coordinator of support services, is retiring at the end of January after 19 years of service to the district. So it is we should applaud her for the amount of exceptional work that she's done in this district. And her retirement will be January 31st. And with that goes the change to the Act 93 agreement, which is her position is a coordinator position. And so we are doing a motion to eliminate that position from the Act 93 agreement so that it is consistent with all the other coordinators who are independent employees that we have in the district. We have a settlement agreement with employee number 009598. And we have 2 resignations. One is a food service worker who is leaving us, who actually left us, and has decided to pursue other opportunities. And then a part-time instructional assistant who also has decided to pursue other opportunities.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve?
Can I have a request that we take item B, section B, letter A as a separate vote.
Item B, section B, letter A. Did I get that right, Kyle?
Yeah, item B, section B, letter A.
Okay.
It's the amendment to the superintendent contract.
Okay, I understand. So can I have a motion to approve the human resources report with the exception of item B, section B, letter A?
Are we approving the engagement letter as well? A
Yes.
2 for 1?
Yes.
Okay, great. So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions on those items for Dr. Ake Little? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, those items are approved. Can I have a motion to approve item B, section B, letter A? Nicole, Ms. King, second.
Second.
Comments or questions?
The board hasn't had the opportunity to discuss this since tabling the conversation a couple weeks ago. Since there isn't an immediate rush for this item, I would like to make a motion to table this item until the board can properly discuss it and give it the attention it deserves. I don't think having this discussion publicly before voting tonight is fair to Mr. Mann or the board. So I make the motion to table it.
Second.
And what do I do with that?
Can we table it for a second time? I thought it had to come to a vote according to Robert's rules.
I think it does have to come to a vote. I don't think we can.
Yeah, it was
Well, it's
untabled
untabled by
tonight.
being on the agenda, is it not?
And we have discussed it previously in the executive session. We had follow-up on it.
We have discussed it since it was tabled in executive session. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Yes. If we're going to move forward with the vote, to give the community background, Mr. Mann has asked the board to amend his current contract. Currently, if he retires from Southern Lehigh after 5 years of employment, the district will cover his health benefits until the age of 65. This proposal changes his contract so that he is fully vested this June. So if he retires in June, we will be paying for his health benefits for 2 years for absolutely nothing in return. Mr. Mann says he has no intention of quitting. If that's true, there would be absolutely no reason to be asking for this change. The district the district stands nothing to gain, but a ton of taxpayer dollars to lose. And we are being pushed very hard to make this decision. The question has been asked and answered by the board twice since the end of August. What has changed to bring it before the board a third time without even allowing the board time to discuss it privately first? The contract is worded as it is for a reason. It protects the district. Altering it at this point only sets us up to lose money and a superintendent. Why would any respectable, fiscally conscious board member vote for that? If we have disposable funds to pay him for this, why wouldn't we reinvest those funds into our students instead? How is this proposal fiscally responsible? In my opinion, it is not.
Other comments or questions?
Quick, Steve. I take seriously the comment by the gentleman, I think he left, that was looking for transparency on the issue. I'd asked Mr. Mon, I don't know if he still has some of the information. At an executive session, he provided some background on the proposed cost to the district. I thought that was helpful. And I certainly trust Mr. Mon generally on things of budget and math and all the stuff I was making fun of earlier. I do think it's important. It's an important vote. It's an important issue. Anytime you look to amend a contract of the superintendent or really anyone else in higher level in administration, I think it's important to have transparency in regards to that. I'm sure Mr. Mahan would appreciate that. I don't think anybody's trying to hide anything here. As it has been listed on the agenda previously, so I certainly feel pretty good about the fact that it's listed on this agenda. So it's actually been listed twice on the agenda. So certainly the public has been made aware of it, and as much as it would be made aware of, if not more so, about something of importance on an agenda. So I feel good about that part. But since there was a person here specifically asking about the impact in dollars and cents, potentially kind of worst case scenario for the district if this was exercised, this particular option, I think it would be important if Mr. Mon still has some of that data that was presented to the board at an earlier one, and I don't think it's necessarily information that can't be shared that I'm aware of. And if this is an objection,
go ahead.
Okay,
Mr. Maud.
If you could provide us some of that information so that the community, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. Yep, it's on. I took time to put this together in light of the question or request. I find it helpful to put numbers to the request. I think it's more important to show numbers in this particular case when there's a request like this. Been through a lot of hiring and negotiations over my professional career, and I felt it was important to put some things together. So the first thing I basically looked at were market pay ranges for superintendents in the region. The fact of the matter is Dr. Mann is at the midpoint of superintendent salary pay ranges. If you were to look at multiple school districts in the area, I would say that it's a fairly large number that, given his experience and success here over the past 24 months or so, significantly less in annual compensation. That's actually the first thing that we went through. And when you look at, again, multiple school districts in the area, it's tens of thousands of dollars, if I were to put some numbers on it, lower than other school district superintendents. And then the other thing I looked at was performance from a financial standpoint. And that was looking purely at the savings that the school districts had since we've been talking about the financial aspects of the school district. In the area of recurring technology savings so far, we've the administration has been able to put forth about $500,000. Staffing and other due to recurring costs, that's to the tune of $1.5 million at this point. Some of those items are reassignments. There are other underutilized things such as bus runs that weren't being used. There were restructuring of positions in the organization. So when you add all those things up, it's about close to $1.5 million. Non-recurring savings, there are some things in technology to the tune of about $86,000. So all in all, those total key savings, and these are just key savings, not getting into every dollar and cent within the savings over the past 2 years, we're looking at about $2 million of savings. The other fact is that when we start looking at the budget yearly, we were in a tax increase standpoint for multiple years, and we had been in budget deficits for, I believe it's 7 years, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, 6 to 7 years of deficit spending and being basically revenue negative. We are now in the second year of revenue positive areas. We've moved into corrective actions and facilities of things that have been, let's say, not improved in a timely fashion from years ago. Things such as our HVAC improvements. There's also been some additional grant writing. I would expect some more of that to continue. There were grants that were not, in fact, applied for in the past. If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to speak out of term. But all in all, the numbers that I had looked at benefits far exceed the school district than this particular request. And quite frankly, if you start adding up the outlays, if in fact the superintendent were to leave, which I have been assured that it's not the intention of the individual to do that, but other reasons of which are personnel related, I would not begin to talk about them here, is far less in cost to this school district than we have seen in savings. Now, I would say also that the superintendent isn't the end all and be all of all those savings. It was the team that did that. But in fact, the team was put together by the superintendent, and the superintendent is the leader and CEO of the school district. And he is ultimately responsible for the success and failure or non-movement of the school district. And, with all of the things I put forth here, of course, these are financial because we're talking about a financial situation here. I would, recognize and commend the administration and staff of the school district in working together as a team to continue moving the school district forward. And if you're really to take a look at things, if we didn't get financially back on track in the school district, we would have many more issues coming down the pike without having the corrective actions that have taken place over the past 2 years. So that was my analysis. I attempted to put it together based on facts. That was my intention. Nothing more, nothing less. I don't sit here in a position to play politics. I'm not doing that. I'm looking at numbers and performance, and that's the bottom line of it. And anybody can take that for face value and make their decisions.
So,
I-
Mr. Mond, so what is the cost specifically? You mentioned all the gains, but what was the cost that you'd calculated again with respect to those 2 years
The-
difference with benefits? I think
Yeah,
that's what we
the
were getting at.
costs would be starting at about $12,000 a year. And then plus any inflationary aspects, which we don't know
Right, so
the
we're
exact
looking,
inflation.
so we're
but-
looking at 12,000 a year plus or minus times
Right.
2.
Right,
25,000,
Correct.
right.
a little bit rounded.
So
But so that's 25,000. That's just counting 2 years. So if Dr. Mann leaves though, on year 3, we actually like $120,000 cost,
Well,
right? And he's
it's
going to
gonna-
get the benefit if he stays in an additional 2 years. So after 5 years, he gets the benefit, and then we are going to be obligated to pay him if he leaves at 5 years. What is it, 100?
Yeah, he-
2-year gap.
if he were to
Yeah,
leave the educational system and retire as a superintendent.
Yeah, Chris, I think,
Right.
I
So
mean, he does already have this
It's-
benefit, right? And just so that
At
community
5 years,
understands
yes.
that, this has been a negotiated part of his contract. It's just that it vests at 5 years currently, and he's asking for it to vest at 3 years. And so the way I would look at that is we incur a worst case scenario is that he exercises that at 3 years. We approve it, and he exercises it 3 years. We'd be on the hook for 25,000 more. I guess the only way, I guess you could look at the possibility that he would have left anyway, and we didn't approve it. I mean, I guess there's that possibility too, but I don't know if that's a little bit hard to figure. But the way I look at it is there's a $25,000 possible worst case scenario cost to the district if we approve this and he exercises it, because he would have been able to get it 2 years earlier than he otherwise would have. He could have waited 5 more years and gotten it then. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, but if he left and we didn't approve it, it wouldn't cost us anything because he wouldn't have stayed his whole 5 years.
That's true.
Well, it would have cost us
One
losing a
at
very
a time,
good
folks.
superintendent.
One at a time. One at a time.
It's going to cost us losing an excellent superintendent.
Why
And
does
that's
this
the one thing
mean,
that I
why
wanted
does
to-
voting for this mean you keep one?
What's that?
How does this ensure we retain or,
So
but,
what-
so not, how does voting against this ensure that we lose one?
And I can answer
Right.
that. I can answer it very clearly. And if you refer back to the numbers that Mr. Mon had shared, where is Dr. Mann in the compensation that he is currently enjoying amongst superintendents in the area? He's at the midpoint. So if it's really about the money, he can go anywhere he wants because superintendents are in demand. And what people are forgetting, this provision that he's asking for, he had it with Abington Heights. He didn't push and negotiate for it here, probably should have. And it would be a mute discussion right now. This is as much a retention vehicle to give him peace of mind about family considerations and possibly being able to step away, maybe for an interim period,
and not have healthcare be an issue so he can attend to family needs. But he's not going to go to another district as a superintendent because he can't. If he does, there's no healthcare. He's not going into the private sector necessarily either. It's only if he steps away. I don't think he's going to do that. But I do think if we don't consider and honor and respect this request, he may consider going elsewhere and do it and get this in his next contract with another district. So I think it's a consideration for retention and honoring a very simple request that is complex and doesn't make sense on its surface because none of us are looking at it from a perspective of being attend to a family member's needs. So that's my consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What I like about this conversation is it's focused on our role as board members, as employers, and we are. And how we reflect that also reflects how we treat our employees. And I'm torn on this given the arguments my fellow board members have made. However, I'm not saying anything that I haven't already discussed and told Dr. Mahan, which is that if this were a situation on tonight's agenda where we were seeing that Dr. Mahan was announcing and asking the board to accept his retirement and also asking the board to approve this medical benefit be fully vested at this point in time because he had a need to retire, my vote would be an absolute yes because we take care of our people here. That's the kind of employer I think we should be. But because those two elements aren't here on this agenda, I am torn in my fiduciary duty to the community and also to not incentivize a superintendent to leave at a time when there is a superintendent shortage. So that is my reasoning behind why my vote tonight will be no. However, if both were to appear on an agenda, my vote would be completely different. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
I saw two people stand up tonight. Can you hear me? Is it on?
No, we can hear you.
You can? Oh, okay. So I saw two people stand up tonight and they both said that they didn't know Dr. Mann and they didn't understand why he wanted this and they asked us to vote no. And the thing is, I do know Dr. Mann. I know him very well. And for 2 years, he's taken every single call and there's been a lot. And I've had community members and friends ask me to call him and ask him a question. And he says to me, have him call me. I'll talk to him. No questions asked. Just give him my number. And I think it shows people who run a business like Steve and myself and my family that you give back to your employees, especially good ones. And he has a proven track record of nonstop success since he got here. And there's a front end of the school and there's a back end of the school. And the back end of the school, he's the CEO. And if he's successful, then that gives all the gains to the front end. And I think we should do this for him because he's a super honorable person. He says he's not going to leave, and I 100% believe him. And that's why I would vote yes.
I had one other thing. So this was first brought to our attention at the end of August, and we said no. And then a couple weeks ago, Stephen gave us his presentation, and we again said no, that we tabled it because we didn't
I'm going to interrupt you because the discussions that happen in executive session are confidential. We are
Okay.
here. If you have any other comments or questions regarding this,
well, I'm giving
we're
it.
not going to rehash or
So
disclose
no, my
what
question
occurred.
is, what changed between the last time we discussed this and said no, and tonight that we are
Dr. Mann
seeming to go the other
requested to
way?
have it put on the agenda. That's what changed.
Okay, but Dr. Mann would not have put it on the agenda without the votes.
There was.
Yeah, can
That
I
is
address
not-
that real quick, just because I'm almost done here with my time on the board.
Thank you.
And no, I mean, I think we need to be careful. This would be something for the next board to think about, is that it's always one thing to disagree, and we disagree on this board, and I've disagreed with a lot of people on this board over the years. And the times that we begin to ascribe like malintent to our disagreements is when I think we cause divisions among ourselves and in the community. And I've done that myself. So, and I think I've learned from it over the years. So I want to say point blank, what has changed between the last executive session and this? I have no idea. I can tell the community right here, right now, I've not spoken to a person about this since this last discussion. I have not spoken to one of these board members about this. Nobody's called me to lobby me. Nobody's asked me how I'm going to vote tonight. I've had zero discussion with any board member here about this. Not a one. So the suggestion, and I'm still not exactly sure I'm going to vote. I think I do know. And I think I've changed my mind. But, I think we should always assume, and for the new board as well, assume the best in people. I didn't agree with Mrs. Gaiman a lot. You were talking about Ms. Gunkel before you. It was funny.
I was the replacement for Corinne Gunkel.
Some
right?
names, yeah, some names.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
you were. You've been my nemesis.
Right.
Exactly. So, but I look back on that. Mrs. Gunkel, Mrs. Gaiman, she doesn't have anything out for me, or doesn't want the worst for the school district or anything else. She wants the best. And I think as long as we see that in people, we disagree. We got different worldviews. Maybe we got disagreements about some things, but she's a good person. She's doing her best, and she volunteers her time, and that's the truth of the 9 people that are here today. You included, Kyle, and four new people that'll join us. I assume they'll be good people too. So if we can just trust that people are generally operating above board and doing their best to make the best decisions on behalf of the school district and the community, then I think that really helps this board to get along, and it's then reflected in the community. And again, I've seen this on both sides. And I'm not knocking you I'm not saying you're doing anything, Kyle. I don't mean that either. I just, this vote is a difficult one for me. It makes me a little uncomfortable for the reasons you said. I think there's some fiscal reasons, that normally I wouldn't really like, and so I don't like the idea of it in some ways, but. I certainly don't think there's been anything nefarious being done here. Mr. Mahan has decided that this is an important issue to him. He's asked the people that employ him to consider it. And now this is where I'm just going to come down on it, which is this. I don't fully understand it. I don't. And I don't want to incentivize Mr. Mahan to leave. I think one of the best decisions I've made over the 16 years I've been here is being on the 3 people that helped the committee to find Mr. Mahan, and then ultimately that this board hired him, because I think he and the team, like Mr. Mon has indicated, that he has assembled, has done an outstanding job over the last 2 years, far in exceeding my expectation, and far exceeding what I have experienced over the 14 years prior. I have every expectation that this district is going to do phenomenal under his leadership going forward, that he is saving, and his team, the district, a lot of money. And that's not the end all be all, because we also want good facilities and a great education and good athletics and all those things. And what I'm seeing is a nice approach to all those things with a fiscal responsibility that allows us to achieve more in that regard. Because if we blow holes in the budget, you can't achieve any of the things you're talking about. And we were kind of going on that, I think we were on that path a little bit. Caused by me, because I was a part of it. But I think this team and Mr. Mahan have turned that around. So now I come to the point that Mr. Mahan's request may cost us $25,000 in the worst case scenario. And I say to myself, if this is important to Mr. Mahan, it'll help retain him. It'll make him satisfied and happy in his job. Just like when I ask for a raise or hope for a raise or other things, or sometimes vacation's important to people. I don't know, lots of things are important to people. In this particular case, this particular issue is important to Mr. Mahan. He's told me he doesn't have any desire to leave. I take him at his word. I have no reason to doubt that either. So I actually think there's a really small possibility that we incur the $25,000. And I'll tell you, this is why I'm going to vote yes to it, is if Mr. Mahan had come to us instead and said, I want a $25,000 raise, I would have said yes to that. And that's the truth. As fiscally, because I know what he means to this district and what he means going forward and how important the superintendent is to a district. It's so critical. And so if I'm willing to say yes to a $25,000 raise, and I think there's probably about a 2 to 3% chance that somehow this gets exercised and costs us $25,000, well, why the heck wouldn't I just vote for it? If it means something to him and it gives him some, whatever it is, security or whatever that makes him happier in his job going forward. I think that as a board member, that's my job to ensure that we hire good people, that we retain good people, and we make sure the good people that we've hired remain here and do the best they can for the district. So to me, I was with you, Kyle. Didn't make a lot of sense to me. Still doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I want to retain him. I actually want to make it hard for him to leave. I get that. But the bottom line is this. He's brought it up again. It means something to him. And as I said, I'd be more than happy to support $25,000 pay increase. So I'm certainly more than happy to approve this. That's my thoughts on it. Other people may differ. I'm going to vote yes for that purpose. I respect people that might vote differently, but I would ask, and as far as I'm aware of, there's no reason to suggest that there's anything more to it than the request as I've put out there, as Mr. Mon has tried to put the numbers so people in the audience understand what it's costing the district, that has been on the agenda twice. And I'm, as a board member, standing here before you saying, I have not discussed any of this with any of you. And there's no backroom deal here that I'm aware of in any way. And I think I would be aware of it otherwise. And so for those reasons, I intend to vote yes. I would encourage the board to do so. I respect others that might not. I understand the questions behind it. That's my 2 cents on it. One of the last things I'll do, and it is a tough vote.
Thank you,
but that's where we're
Mr.
at.
Deming. Thank you.
Are you cutting me off?
I am. You're getting redundant. I cut off people who get redundant. Is there any new comment or question? Okay, let's vote. We can take a roll call on this.
Yes.
New.
No.
Yes. I'm sorry? Yes. William Lysette?
Yes.
Stephen Maud?
Aye.
Mary Jo Reiner?
Yes.
Priya Serene?
No.
Christopher Whale?
Yes.
Okay. The
I just
contract
wanna
revision is
thank the board,
approved.
right. I just want to thank the board in its totality, and I very much respect everyone's points of view, both in favor and against. So I thank you all for this consideration.
Okay. Do we have a facilities report?
I'll give a quick facilities report. At the last meeting, two key areas. One, just the punch list for the stadium. Some things like trees and remaining issues will be done in the spring. The pavement issues will be done before this tomorrow. Okay, so that'll be done before the winter season truly sets in and the pavement plants shut down. The other major thing that we looked at with the engineering firm was a 3-year plan that's beginning to take shape for facilities needs. Some small that can be done in-house, 5-year needs. Sorry, 5-year. Okay. So the 5-year plan with a maintenance concentration over 3 years. Some of those items are small, they can be done in-house by our staff. Much of the large expenditures, which will be coming before the new school board in the coming year to be discussed as part of the budgeting process, are roof replacement, chiller replacements, huge systems, huge expense. It is quite a comprehensive list, an expensive list, but it's a needed area of focus to make sure that what has been able to be maintained will continue as far as not having, leaky roofs and things such as that, and also having air-conditioned buildings, although I'm sure most of us sitting here remember when schools were not air-conditioned, and we actually went much longer into December, or not December, into June, when it was a lot hotter. But all of that said, Lou and the staff have put together a very strong plan with the assistance of EI, and we'll be bringing that to the new board to educate you on what's needed and what the budget impacts will be over the coming years. So while I think it was 2031, if I remember correctly, we would have had about $1 million in debt. That's most likely not going to be the situation because of what needs to be addressed in the next really 3 to 5 years. Trying to remember if there's anything else. That was
Bill,
the two areas of focus.
Bill,
So,
Can
yes.
you comment on the tiered system, the 6-tiered system that was developed? Like a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4,
For
level
the
5? Yeah.
prioritization. I didn't, but Lou will
Yeah.
address that.
Since it's so much detailed information, I'm going to encapsulate that at the back end of one of the budget presentations, one of the early budget presentations in January. That'll give the new board members an opportunity to see what the level 1 and level 2 items were determined. And those have to do with, health and safety, building systems. And that overall number wraps up to about $13.2 million.
Right. I would say shortly after our new board is seated, we're going to be coming back with really three things. The first is the current budget and how we're doing with the current budget and historically. The second is going to be our short and intermediate term obligations with respect to facilities. And the third thing we're going to be talking about is negotiations. So 3 very critical issues that the board will be working with and ones that we have to get right. And so there's lots of work to be doing for us in the new year.
Like to thank
Oh,
Mr.
Just going to say, Steve just reminded me, the other thing was the auditorium improvements, some of which
was
were
about to
discussed
wait.
tonight, but there's also some longer term things that they're looking at also that will be part of that budgeting process.
Because I'm assuming you're going to look, because we had all that assessment data that was obtained prior to the
Yeah.
project. So
All of that
I remember
from
you
K-
mentioned it, Lou, that you were going to.
Everything from KCPA has
We already
been
paid for that.
analyzed by the internal, our administrative staff. They've put it into a spreadsheet that Michael Rohrbach has.
Okay.
And also that's been utilized by EI so that they weren't duplicating those efforts. Yeah, that's the architect of record. I thought it was the engineer too. No? Sorry, it's the engineer of record.
Okay.
Okay, they're both.
Mr. Loy said, thank you for chairing the Facilities Committee and your succinct and thorough reports. With that, do we have any visitor comments? Any new business or other business? We are adjourned at 8:57. Thank you, everybody.
You too. Yours was many more years than mine.
Well.